It felt largely confined to, activists, maybe some specific legal scholars.
Absolutely. Not mainstream political talk, generally.
But now, fast forward to May 2025, and we're hearing it more and more from politicians in the UK and the US.
That's right. And that shift is really what we want to dig into today.
So we're looking at this through the lens of some recent analysis.
Yes. Specifically, an article by Dr. Raja King, just published this week. It's titled, "Now It's a Genocide," with the question mark.
Yay.
It's in the Journal of Islamic Psychology and Philosophy.
Okay, now it's a genocide. Interesting title.
It is. And our aim here is really to unpack the key factors Dr. King identifies as driving this evolution in how political figures are talking about it, for you listening.
Right. So where's the best place to start untangling this? Dr. King seems to emphasize the growing evidence and that international legal pressure.
That feels like the core, doesn't it? A crucial starting point.
Definitely.
If you rewind to mid-2024, like you said, there were widespread concerns, sure, but the formal legal side was, let's say, more measured.
Okay.
South Africa had already brought its ICJ case alleging genocide late in 2023.
Right. That was a big moment.
Huge. But the court's initial interim ruling, that came in January 2024, it called for preventative measures. It didn't actually confirm genocide was happening at that stage.
So a signal of serious risk, maybe, but not a final determination.
Exactly. A strong warning shot, you could say.
So what changed by 2025 on that legal front? What tipped the balance in the rhetoric?
Well, according to Dr. King's analysis, it's really the sheer weight and maybe the nature of the evidence that kept accumulating.
Piling up.
Piling up, yes.
Yeah.
A really significant marker was that December 2024 report from Amnesty International.
Ah, yes, I remember that.
They didn't mince words. They concluded that Israel's actions, the killings, the infrastructure destruction, blocking aid, that these met the specific criteria for genocide under the UN Convention.
And that convention definition is quite specific, isn't it? It's not just about mass killing.
Precisely. It requires that intent element, the intent to destroy a group, in whole or in part. Amnesty laid out its case, arguing the pattern of actions demonstrated that intent.
That's a powerful statement coming from Amnesty. Did other legal developments add to this pressure?
They did. There was the ICJ's advisory opinion in July 2024. It declared the occupation illegal and, significantly, pointed to practices resembling apartheid.
An advisory opinion, so not strictly binding like a state versus state judgment.
Correct, but it carries enormous moral and legal weight. It influences how international law is interpreted. Then, fast forward again to November 2024, and you have the ICC.
The International Criminal Court.
Yes, issuing arrest warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and others, not for genocide itself, but for war crimes and crimes against humanity.
Still extremely serious allegations at the individual level.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And while not a genocide finding, these ICC warrants definitely added weight to the overall narrative that something deeply unlawful was happening, lending credibility, perhaps, to the stronger term.
And it seems like these legal moves started to kind of give politicians a bit more cover to speak out. Dr. King mentions a UK Conservative MP, Mark Pritchard, referencing international law in Parliament.
Exactly. That Hansard record shows the shift. Even within parties traditionally very supportive of Israel, the legal framework provided a legitimate basis for voicing concern.
A hook to hang their concerns on, maybe.
Perhaps, yes. But Dr. King also makes the point that this was more noticeable in the UK initially. In the US, the mainstream of both parties, Democrats and Republicans, largely held the line on strong support for Israel. Though even there you had figures like Senator Bernie Sanders using terms like ethnic cleansing. So the discomfort was clearly growing across the board, even if the specific word genocide wasn't widespread among US officials yet.
Okay, so you have this legal pressure cooker building up, the evidence mounting. But Dr. King also points to another huge factor: public opinion, grassroots movements.
Yes, you really can't discount the impact of that. The shift in public sentiment, particularly in the UK and US from 2024 onwards, was quite dramatic.
We saw polls reflecting that, didn't we?
He did. Dr. King cites UK polls from late 2023 showing 71% wanting an immediate ceasefire. That's a huge majority.
71%. Wow.
And by mid-2024, other polls showed 58% backing a full arms ban on Israel.
Those numbers are hard for politicians to ignore, especially with the massive protests we saw, say, in London.
Absolutely. That puts direct pressure on MPs, on the government. And a similar trend was visible in the U.S. Yes.
Pew Research data.
Yes, Pew data tracked from 2022 up to 2025 showed increasingly unfavorable views of Israel, particularly among Democrats and younger Republicans.
And the Genocide Joe chants directed at Biden, that must have registered politically.
Oh, certainly. It might have been a more extreme expression, but it highlighted the political cost of appearing unwavering in support when a significant part of the base felt very differently.
Politicians up for re-election tend to notice those things.
They do. Dr. King argues this groundswell really forced politicians to, at the very least, reconsider their public messaging. He used the example of Keir Starmer, the UK Labour leader.
Right, despite his human rights background.
Exactly. He faced a lot of criticism for perceived hesitancy early on to strongly condemn Israel's actions. The pressure from within Labour and the public was immense.
And what about the U.S. student movement? The campus protests demanding divestment, ceasefire, did they move the needle?
Okay, Dr. King suggests they did have a galvanizing effect. They certainly pushed the conversation, maybe radicalized it to some extent, and likely encouraged some Democrats to voice dissent more openly.
So it created space for disagreement.
It seems so. And again, simple electoral maths plays a role. Aligning, or appearing to align with strong voter sentiment, is often politically advantageous.
Okay, so we've got evidence, legal pressure, public opinion. But Dr. King also brings up political opportunism, shifting alliances. It suggests maybe it's not all just a reaction to pressure or a moral shift.
That's a really crucial layer to this. It's not just passive reaction, it's also about active political strategy.
How? So in the UK, for example.
Oh, Dr. King points to some conservative MPs maybe seeing an advantage in distancing themselves slightly, starting to talk more about recognizing a Palestinian state, for instance.
Trying to appeal to a broader constituency.
Potentially. Or sensing the direction of public mood. And within Labor, it was complex too.
The internal tensions you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. You had David Lammy, the shadow foreign secretary, making these cautious statements about possible international law breaches.
Okay.
But then Starmer's office might issue statements that seem to sort of walk that back slightly or moderate it. It looks like a balancing act.
Trying to keep different factions within the party on board.
Precisely. Juggling pro-Israel and pro-Palestinian voices within Labor.
And this element of political calculation, was it playing out in the U.S. as well, even if the shift was less pronounced?
Dr. King suggests yes. Biden's strong initial backing for Israel clearly alienated some progressives. That might have had electoral consequences in 2024.
A political cost.
Potentially. And under the second Trump administration, the messaging has been, well, mixed. You have his historical support for Israel, but also reports of aides defending things like voluntary departure for Gazans.
Which many see as a euphemism for ethnic cleansing.
Exactly. So for some politicians on both sides of the Atlantic, perhaps adopting stronger language, maybe even using the word genocide, could be a way to stand out.
Appeal to younger voters, maybe? Progressives alienated by the status quo?
That seems plausible, especially if Netanyahu's government continued to alienate even moderate opinion internationally. It creates a political opening.
Right. And driving all of this, of course, were the actual events on the ground. Dr. King stresses the impact of Israel's escalating actions and the sheer visibility of it all.
Yes, that's fundamental. After mid-2024, the intensification seemed undeniable, particularly the blockade on humanitarian aid.
Which UN experts and Amnesty explicitly called out.
They did, labeling it a deliberate attempt to destroy Gaza's population. That's incredibly strong language from those bodies.
And the physical destruction, the attacks on hospitals?
The scale was vast, and in the age of social media, horrific incidents like the burning of Shaban al-Dalu, these images and videos spread instantly.
Making it impossible to ignore.
Much harder, certainly. Harder for politicians to dismiss or minimize what people were seeing with their own eyes.
It bypasses traditional media gatekeepers to some extent.
It does. And Dr. King also mentions those reported Netanyahu comments about the inevitability of ethnic cleansing in Gaza. Even if disputed, those reports fueled outrage.
So contrasting that with the initial narrative after October 7th.
Yes, back then, the dominant frame politically was self-defense. You had figures like David Cameron, then UK Foreign Secretary, quickly dismissing genocide talk.
That stance became much harder to maintain.
Increasingly untenable, it seems. With over 50,000 Palestinian deaths reported by mid-2025 and Israel's apparent defiance of international rulings, the self-defense argument wore thin for many observers.
Okay, so pulling these threads together, the evidence, the law, the public, the politics, the sheer reality on the ground, it really begs the question Dr. King raises, Why the delay? Why did it take so long for politicians to start using this language more openly?
It's a critical question, and Dr. King offers several overlapping reasons. First, just deep-seated geopolitical loyalty.
The U.S.-UK relationship with Israel.
Exactly. It's like a cornerstone of foreign policy for both. Huge amounts of U.S. military aid, UK defense agreements. Accusing a key ally of genocide is not something done lightly. It risks major diplomatic fallout.
Serious strategic implications.
Absolutely. Then there's lobby influence. Pro-Israel groups like AIPAC in the U.S., Conservative Friends of Israel in the U.K., they are powerful.
Politically and financially.
Yes. Dr. King cites examples, like UK MPs receiving significant funds from the Israel lobby, even during the Gaza campaign. That inevitably raises questions about influence on political speech.
Understandable. And the third factor,
Fear of backlash, specifically the accusation of anti-Semitism.
which is often leveled against critics of Israeli policy.
Very quickly, yes. And it's a potent charge. Dr. King points to the Israeli MP, Ofer Kassif, nearly being kicked out of the Knesset just for supporting South Africa's ICJ case.
A chilling effect.
It absolutely can be. Politicians are naturally risk-averse regarding career-damaging accusations.
Okay, so loyalty, lobbying, fear, anything else?
Finally, Dr. King mentions just gradual awareness. The idea that this was genocide didn't just appear fully formed. It gained traction slowly.
As the evidence built up.
As the evidence built, as the legal rulings came out, as public protests amplified, what experts remember those 800 international law scholars warning early on back in October 2023, what they had been saying.
So it needed to reach a kind of critical mass.
Seems that way. A confluence of all these factors pushing in the same direction.
But Dr. King doesn't stop there. He finishes with a really sharp point, questioning if this rhetorical shift is actually genuine.
Yes, this is perhaps the most challenging part of his analysis. Is it sincere? He highlights the gap between the words and the actions.
For example?
Well, look at arms sales. The UK suspended only a tiny fraction of export licenses. The US continues massive weapons supplies.
So the talk changed, but the material support didn't, really.
Largely, no. And he notes Starmer's apparent reluctance to fully back Lamy's criticism of the aid blockade, or the continued strong bipartisan support for Israel in the U.S. Congress, despite public opinion shifts.
It suggests the words might be more about appeasing public anger.
Then about a fundamental policy change. That's the concern. It could be seen as managing dissent rather than driving real change.
Political expediency over a moral shift.
That's the question Dr. King implicitly raises. He even touches on the broader context. Is this part of a wider, maybe overdue, Western reckoning with colonial legacies, with biases in how conflicts are viewed?
The issue of selective outrage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why this situation, but perhaps less focus on, say, ethnic cleansing in Sudan, which the UN has also documented?
Yeah.
It raises uncomfortable questions about consistency and motivation.
So if we were to summarize Dr. King's argument for listeners, the shift in political language about Gaza seems driven by this potent mix of evidence, legal rulings, public pressure, and yes, some political strategy.
The complex interplay of factors.
Right.
But, and this is his key takeaway, the significant gap between that evolving rhetoric and the lack of concrete policy shifts suggests many politicians may be following the public mood rather than leading with conviction.
Playing catch-up, perhaps.
Or performing concern, some might argue.
And Dr. King insists the real test isn't just using the word genocide.
No. The true measure, he argues, lies in concrete actions. Ending arms sales, imposing sanctions, genuinely supporting ICC prosecutions, things that have real-world consequences.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with a pretty critical question to ponder, doesn't it?
It does. Will this shift in narrative, this increased willingness to use the term genocide, actually lead to meaningful changes in policy and action?
Or will it ultimately prove to be more of a performative gesture, a way to manage public anger without fundamentally altering the dynamics? Thinking about that distinction feels pretty